Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to see you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, first of all, it's great to be back in Flint. I want to thank Dan Kildee for the great job that he did fighting for you in Congress to get you the money you need to lay new water lines and get this community going in the right direction again. I want to thank Mayor Karen Weaver for her leadership during this whole water crisis and her service. UM Flint Chancellor Sue Borrego, thank you. She told me that she actually spent 3 years at the University of Arkansas, which probably explains how effective she is. Mayor Verge Bonero, it's good to see you again. Senator Jim Anich, thank you. Representative Sheldon Neely, Representative Phil Phelps. I want to thank my good friend, your former Governor Jim Blanchard, for being here, former ambassador to Canada, and for all he's done. My friend Joel Ferguson, thank you for showing up. And we've got one candidate here I want to acknowledge. Hitch Ahmed, the candidate for the State Board of Education, is the only Arab and the only Muslim on the ticket, and he is a second or third generation Michigander. He's part of our America, and he ought to be given a chance to serve. And I want to thank Gerald Kareem, the UAW director of Region 1D. You know, I had an interesting time backstage. I've been back there taking pictures. And there are three things I'll never forget. One is I met little Mary Copini, who's become the sort of face of Flint. And she said it was okay for me to love balloons. You may have noted that the media all over America made fun of me at the Democratic convention because after Hillary spoke, they dropped all these balloons, and I was the last one playing with the balloons. And so I asked Mary, there she is, I said, do you think I'm too old to like balloons? She said, no, you can't be too old to like balloons. So there it is. I have it on authority that it's okay. Then I met that young man in a bow tie there, Devin Addington, and he promised to dress all the people on my staff under 25. It's cool as he is. And then I met, I think it was Bishop Maxwell, who said his grandfather, Luther Washington, this is the most important part. I can barely talk about this. In the 1950s, was a working man in Hope, Arkansas, who bought his groceries from my grandfather. My grandfather had his little grocery store. Most of his customers were African American. It was across the street from the cemetery where he and my grandmother and my mother and my father are all buried. And he said, you know, my granddad told me your grandfather was a really good man because he knew my grandfather was working hard. And when he didn't have any money and he came in the grocery store and his kids were hungry, he said, take whatever you need and come back and pay me when you can. And that's what he did. That's the America we need again today, where we're all working together. We're all working and we trust each other. I want to say first, the debate showed who should be president, I think. It showed the differences in personal service, in philosophy, in policy, and in preparedness. But the election's not over because there's a lot of road rage out there. And there are people who have difficulty thinking about this in normal terms because They've now been basically 15 years without a raise, while the cost of a lot of their basic things are going up. And they look for things and people to blame. So in a fundamental way, this election will be decided by whether we choose answers or anger, whether we choose empowerment or resentment, whether we think we're all in this together or it's us versus them, and whether we think we can be safest in the world with walls or bridges. And so I want to do something that isn't often done in this election. It's been a crazy election, hasn't it? It's like every day somebody else claims the right to pour poison down our throat. I'm going to tell you why you should be for Hillary. You already know why you should be against the other guy. I'm going to tell you what's in it for you. You know, I have this crazy and apparently really old-fashioned idea that elections ought to be carried out based on who's going to do the best job for you. We have to vote for someone who will bring the right kind of change. Make no mistake about it, this will be a change election. The question is, what kind of change do you want? And I was just on the phone with an old friend of mine from Texas. He said, he was a great one-liner. I said, you got any one-liners for me before I go give a speech? He said, yeah. Tell them if you don't want somebody to drive the truck off the cliff, don't give them the keys. And well, I want to tell you where that truck can go. I spent half my life now trying to help people find a job, start a business, lift their incomes, educate their kids, provide health care, make a living, to prove that the American dream is big enough to encompass all of us, and that if we're all in it together, we'll actually do better. All over the world where I work, I find this. I was just in Saginaw, and I was shaking hands with this lady who I thought was just a local. I personally believe 10 years from now, when people look back on this period, they'll give President Obama better economic marks because he did this. Trying to derail him. Second, like I told you, I've been doing this half of my life. We are by far the best positioned country for the next 10 years, the next 20 years, the next 30 years for the following reasons. Number one, we have the youngest, most diverse workforce of any big country in the world. And having lost it, I can tell you, youth matters. That is, look at these big burly union guys back here. They're all younger than I am. That's a good thing. Number two, we have the best system of higher education and job training of any country in the world. We just make college affordable, the debt repayable, and redignify skills training for people that don't need a 4-year college degree to have a good middle-class job. Number three, we rank first or second in the world in our ability to generate electricity from the sun, the wind, and other clean sources. And what that means is if we do this right, power can be almost free within a decade, and then you can get all the manufacturing jobs you want back at high wages because labor is increasingly productive. Manufacturing is the most productive sector of every economy, which the good news is you can make more money. The bad news is fewer people can produce more stuff every year. But the reason we have to be a manufacturing country is every single manufacturing job creates two and a half other jobs. So the main things in manufacturing today are the cost of materials, transportation, and energy. If you got the most productive workforce, you get the energy costs down, and we got the biggest market, you can save all the transportation costs. We can make everything here in America again if we do it right. But we got to have the right policies. Those are just some of the advantages of the American economy. Every instinct I have, based on a lifetime of working on this, tells me we are just this close to being able to take this economy off and lift everybody. Last year, now no one feels this yet, so the voters don't believe it. You probably don't believe it. But the statistics show that personal income went up more than 5% last year, and it's the first time since I left office that 80%, the bottom 80% of us, had the biggest percentage gains. So if we do that, if we can do that for 4 or 5 years, you'll see upward mobility. You'll see rising incomes. You'll see people being able to pay their bills and people having more confidence in the economy growing. So I want to tell you why you ought to be for Hillary. First, she's the only person who's got a clear, achievable, affordable economic strategy for more jobs, higher incomes, more upward mobility, less inequality. And let me tell you what it is. Number one, while interest rates are still lower than inflation, our grandchildren will never forgive us if we do not undertake a major plan to rebuild America's roads and bridges and ports and airports and water systems.